Welcome back to Local SEO Tactics, where each week we bring you tips and tricks on how to help your business grow and get found online. I'm your host, Jesse Dolan, back here with our second part of our interview with Joe Anderson. Joe Anderson with Metaphor Creations is joining us here to talk about site speed, WordPress site speed, plugin bloat, things you can do to speed up your website, things you want to avoid that will slow down your website. And it's the second part of our two-part interview. If you haven't checked out episode 43, definitely go back and check that out. It's the first part of this interview. Here today, we're getting into the second half. And if you're not familiar with who Joe Anderson of Metaphor Creations is, also go back and check out episode 39 on our show. We talked about plugins, WordPress plugins, some good practices, things to avoid. And Joe is a very important part of what we do here at Intrix and Local SEO Tactics. Super smart, very talented guy. Really helps us on a lot of our back-end WordPress development, plugin development, things like that. Lots of great content with Joe. Let's dive right back in and get to the second part of our episode here without any further delay. Another thing that you're going to want to do is caching your website. So I don't know if it's like server side, client side. Do you want to break that down? Or?
Yeah, well, there's different types of caching. One of the main type of caching that you want to use on your site is just a page cache.
Okay.
And that does not come default with WordPress. There's plenty of plugins out there that you can use to help cache your site. And what the caching does is it's for most of these sites on WordPress and any site that isn't just a static HTML web page, there's your content is rendered through the code, through PHP, through JavaScript. So that all takes processing and loading assets in. So a page cache will more or less take a screenshot, not a real screenshot, but take a snapshot of your page. So when the next person comes and views that same page, it shows up nice and quick. It doesn't have to go through all the rendering to re-render the page.
Right.
So you set up these page cache plugins to cache different pages of your site. The first time somebody comes to the page, it may take a little bit longer, than normal to load, but still hopefully not too slow if you have things set up correctly. But then the next time you go to that page, it's basically instantaneous that it shows up.
So like any element that was part of the initial load doesn't reload essentially. I mean, to its full extent, it's much quicker.
Yeah, and most of the time with the plugins, say for WordPress, if you make content changes to the page that's been cached, it'll flush the cache, so the next time somebody shows up, it will re-render it and then store that cache for the next time. So
again, just to reset, look into your hosting, look into a CDN like Cloudflare, page caching like WP Rocket, which is a plugin for WordPress. There are also some other plugins that aren't caching plugins that can help you speed up your website. Do you have a couple examples of that?
Yeah, well, I'll go back quickly to the caching. In addition to caching, there's plugins that minimize scripts.
Okay.
They take, your page loads. You have maybe multiple style sheets being loaded, multiple JavaScript files. There's plugins that'll take and kind of squash them all into one bit of code, because every single external asset that loads takes time on your server to load. So it kind of compresses it into one file to load. I will have to say, though, with the minimizing plugins, you do have potential to run into errors on your site because some scripts just don't render well when they're compressed and minimized and other things. So it's worth a try if you want to take that extra step to speed up your site a little bit. Find a minimizing plugin or a plugin that combines scripts. But just be aware that you test it out and make sure your site's still running fine afterwards.
Right.
Most of the time, I actually don't use them because I don't feel like they add that much benefit.
Kind of a risk reward.
Yeah.
Okay. So. Now with that, so some people are like, well, I don't have much, script or these kinds of things to even worry about. Is it fair to say that, just for the average person out there managing their own WordPress, I mean, WordPress is slick. I mean, it's in a lot of cases, one-click install sets it all up. Whether you know it or not, there's a lot of style sheets and a lot of scripting running on those things, right?
Yeah. So going into WordPress plugins, I mean, one thing that makes WordPress great is there's a ton of plugins out there. Yeah. There's a ton of free ones that are awesome. There's a ton of paid ones that are awesome.
Yeah.
And I know one of the questions that most people have is, how many plugins is too many? Or I don't want to use plugins because they slow down my site. How do I put this code directly into my theme? But one thing to realize is there's really no limit to how many plugins you can have on your site. There's no magic limit. What you want to be aware of is how well the plugin is written. If you have good code, a developer who writes good code for your plugin, your site should run great.
Yeah.
But with all the free plugins out there, there's potential for a lot of bad code that you may not even realize. You install it on your site thinking it's going to do something awesome, but it affects your site negatively, and all of a sudden your site starts loading slow and you're not sure why. So always be sure when you do download plugins, especially at the WordPress repository, check out the ratings. I know we talk about ratings a lot here on this podcast, not only for your business or buying products, but a plugin is no different. It's basically a product. You check out the ratings, see how many active installations are, because you can see those stats. If there's, a ton of people who have this plugin installed in their site, there obviously must be something right with it. It doesn't necessarily have to have a complete 5-star review, because a lot of times people user error.
It's almost impossible.
Things don't work quite right.
You get north of 10 or 20 reviews, it's almost impossible to have perfect 5-star.
But 4 to 5-star review, and lots of active installations. That way, people are using it and sticking with it. And for the most part, you can be pretty sure that the plugin runs fairly smoothly.
Let me ask you a question on this. It's a little bit off topic, but it's something I've kind of been curious about, and I just want to ask you, because you are a developer, and you're on the other side of that panel. Like us as customers, like you said, we're going to look at the reviews and check out the active installations. Active installations. Does that mean how many people are right now using this on a website, or just like total downloaded and applied ever? Is there a distinction there that you're aware of, or?
I don't have a perfect answer for you.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it is the number of sites that the plugin is actually installed on.
Like legitimately
I could be wrong.
Right,
it could be the number of sites that it's just been activated on,
historically
possibly removed.
Okay.
I guess I could look into that.
Okay.
And get an answer for you.
Oh, no worries. I was just curious if you knew, just because I've kind of always wondered that. Like, is this over the last 10 years how many people have installed this, or like right now, there's 85,000 websites running this plugin right now. You know what I mean? Because just curious about it.
That's kind of a good question. I kind of want to look into that. I know on WordPress.org it does say active installations. That number. So does that actually mean currently active? But
so either way, the point is on that though is the more people using it and the higher the reviews, the odds are you're a little bit safer. But still, if whether you're running 5 or 55 plugins on your website, if you're seeing it slow, just start disabling them, seeing if there's one that's causing a problem.
Yeah, so that's one thing I run into with my plugins too, especially like my Diddy News Ticker plugin uses JavaScript to run.
Okay.
Which if there's another plugin, or like say this theme that somebody's using has a JavaScript error on the site, it most of the time kills JavaScript from running.
Sure. It just stalls out there.
Yeah, so my plugin will look like it's not working at all, and I get multiple support questions throughout the month about, hey, your plugin's not working. Then I look on their site in the developer tools on their webpage and say, well, you got this JavaScript error, that JavaScript error, so you got to resolve this first.
Mine's not even having a chance to run because you're already stalled out.
So my scripts just aren't running. So what you do when you do have issues on your site, first thing you do is just disable all your plugins if you're able to. If you have a live site, this is a little tricky, but if your site's broken, you don't really have much of a choice. But try to do it in off hours. Disable all your plugins, get your site back to where it's working fine, and then just re-enable plugins one by one and see where the issue starts happening. If something starts getting wonky after you enable this one plugin, okay, you've tracked down the issue most likely to that one plugin, and then you kind of go from there.
I'd throw at people too, like for how to test that as you're activating them. And you can, overrule me here if you got something better, but let's say if you're using caching or any of these other things to help speed up your loading times, so you don't get a false positive. I usually run this through webpagetest.org, which kind of gives you a waterfall report on what loaded and the speeds.
Okay.
Because if I visit my website, hit refresh, again, if it's caching some of that content, I may be enabling some plugins, but I'm kind of getting a false quick load because it's already been loaded before in caching and things like that, So when I'm doing something like that, just to be like hardcore, can't mistake this. You know what I mean? I just run it through that, or there's, you just, do a Google search for web page speed, testing, whatever. You can find other tools too. Webpagetest.org is pretty boring to look at, but it, it gives you the straight up data. So that'd just be something there as you're doing that. If you have the time and you can do that, let's kind of run it through a third party tool. Don't just go off your own visual, eye.
I will say, going back to my comment on there not being too many plugins to have on your site, at the same time, I like to keep my plugin list pretty trim.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you add a plugin for a certain functionality, then down the road you realize you want something a little different, so you add another plugin in that does what you want, but then you forget to disable this one, and now sometimes you can build up a bunch of plugins, even if they run good. If there's good code, there's just unnecessary code running.
Right.
So make sure you keep an eye on that. You're not running plugins that you just don't even need anymore.
Well, I think too, this isn't really a security episode, but I mean, if you're not using a plugin anymore, number one, you don't need it.
Yep.
Might as well delete it. But let's say if you don't, number two, you switched plugins because you found a better one, which means that older one, wasn't as good, which means maybe the developer's stopping to support it, which means who knows if it's going to be outdated or there's some security hole down the road. I mean, I can't think of any good reason to keep a plugin installed that you're not using anymore. So I think that's great advice for everybody on multiple levels. So
I'm going to add on to that, even though we're not on the
Sure.
security podcast. I know plenty of sites out there and people who they don't want to update their plugins because they're afraid something's going to break.
Sure.
They don't want to risk that. First of all, it's always good practice to back up your site just in case, because even if with great code in the plugin, something may go wrong with your internet connection while it's running, and half of it's load and half it's deleted, and you're like, so make sure your site's backed up.
It's technology. Things glitch. I mean, come on.
Yeah, but what you need to realize, if, say, your theme has an update available, or a plugin you're using has an update available, there's a reason that there's an update available.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just, enhanced functionality. Many times it's due to bugs that the developer has found and fixed. So you want to fix issues that may be happening. And, the biggest thing, which doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes there are security issues, that are found.
Pretty critical,
that you want to update because you don't want your site to get hacked because there's one loose end in a plugin that has been fixed, but you just didn't want to update your plugin for fear of something, or just not wanting to spend the time to press a button.
I'll tell you what, this does bring it full circle, because that's security related stuff, but tell you what, you want a slow website, get hacked. You really want to see that thing crawl to a halt or completely get taken down?
If you want,
get hacked. So
some ISIS music playing on your homepage.
Right. So and unfortunately, we speak from experience on that. So
which rolls back into hosting.
Right. Exactly. So I think we can probably wrap it up with that. Again, just to kind of reset the thing, get some good hosting. Check out a CDN and really pay attention to your plugins. There's some plugins you can add to enhance your speed, like we mentioned quick. But then also in general, kind of avoid that plugin bloat and kind of be managing it and be aware of it. With these plugins or these apps, if you will, on your website, it's no different than the software on your computer, or apps on your phone. Try to keep it as trim as possible, like you're saying, and keep it as light as possible. And you're just going to eliminate as many risks as possible and make your job a lot easier for maintaining this thing. So
I mean, plugins are great. I mean, they give you easy opportunity to add some great functionality to your site. Even as a developer, I don't want to build everything from scratch. If there's something out there that exists that I trust, I make use of it, because time is time, But like just said, at the same time, keep it trim. If you're not using the functionality of a plugin, disable it, just delete it. If something bigger and better comes along that you'd rather use, switch it up, but don't leave things just hanging out there running on your site that you don't need.
Right. So Joe, if people want to reach out to you directly, how would they find you?
You can contact me at metaphorcreations.com. I do have a contact form on my site.
And if you guys have any questions, if you can't remember that, as always, you can reach out to us at intrix.com/show. Again, full disclosure, Joe is a very critical part of our Intrix operations here. So for some reason, if you have trouble remembering metaphorcreations.com and you want to reach out through us, we can connect you to Joe. We're happy to do that. He's been part of what we do for a very long time. We work very closely together, and in our opinion, is very critical to having a full functioning and website and doing what we do. So hopefully you guys got some good stuff out of that episode. Again, kind of a little bit more peek under the hood for site speed, which is ridiculously important for your Google rankings. And just hopefully some stuff you can take action on. We're going to get into our 5-star review of the week here. A big shout out to everybody who's left us a review so far. We absolutely love it. This is just something that we do to help people out, to empower you and help you grow your business if you're into that kind of thing. So when we get this kind of feedback, we like to read them, to share them with everybody else. And I don't know, just makes me feel kind of warm and fuzzy, right? So we're going to read our 5-star review of the week this week here. It's from Pause to Perfect. And when I say perfect, I mean multiple R's, like perfect, right? See what they did there? Pause to Perfect.
Good puns.
Right? 5-star, extremely resourceful. This podcast is huge. This podcast is a huge help to online business owners to get set up for success. Highly recommended. Thanks for that great 5-star review, Pause to Perfect. I hope everybody feels like that. And again, if you do, love to hear from it. Go to intrix.com/iTunes and let us know what you think. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed the conclusion of our 2-part episode there with Joe Anderson from Metaphor Creations. Again, if you haven't checked out episode 39 or last week's episode, go to localseotactics.com so you can hear more of our interviews with Joe and just the great information that he has to share. Also, while you're there, check out our free instant SEO audit. Top right corner, click on it. It's going to take just about a minute or two. You plug in your website page or competitor's page that you want to reverse engineer and the keyword that you want to run the score against, and it's going to give you a PDF in your email. It's going to give you a checklist of things that you need to improve. You can make those improvements, check them off the list, and then run it again to check your score. And again, if you want to plug in a competitor's, just to kind of reverse engineer, see what they're doing right, and compare your score against those. A lot of people use that for that purpose as well. Thanks for sticking with us. We'll catch you guys next week.